Welcome back, everybody. This is The Tourist.
And the Nerd.
And we're happy to announce that the library is once again open.
Yay!
Today we have a really fun topic to discuss, which is really close to our hearts and many readers that we know enjoy, and it is fantasy.
Especially YA fantasy.
Especially YA fantasy. So we're both seasoned readers and we've dealt with a lot of fantasy, high fantasy and YA fantasy, and we're big fans. So with us being big fans comes a lot of opinions.
a lot of opinions.
So I think we should just get into it, shall we?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so first I wanted to establish sort of the fantasy that we've read up until now. We realized that we haven't read a lot of the same literature when it comes to fantasy.
If you've listened to our top 10 episode, you'll know we have a very diverse spectrum of reading.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah,
definitely, and it's no surprise that it's the same with fantasy. We've both read quite a lot of YA and quite a lot of high fantasy, and I think it's important to establish a difference first. So I read a little about what the main difference between YA fantasy and high fantasy is, and the point is mainly that high fantasy creates an entire world of its own. It has different races, different species, and different languages. This is a big thing, creating its own language, right? While YA fantasy, I don't want to say is a lot more simple, but it is.
It is. I mean, the world is usually created around the story and based on what the story needs at that time. It's not like with high fantasy where the world is already established and you just place the plot inside that world.
Yes, exactly. This is what we spoke about just before we started filming. The main thing with YA fantasy is exactly this. The world serves the plot, while in high fantasy, the plot serves the world.
Exactly.
And that's like the main difference that we wanted to establish. I don't know. Should we just start bashing YA fantasy, shall we?
Okay. Disclaimer. Again, we're going to put it at the beginning. This discussion may contain some spoilers.
Yeah.
We don't know what we're going to discuss as we go, so just a warning. When you're listening to this, you have been warned.
Yeah. And I would like to add just another disclaimer on a more like personal level from me. I have absolutely no gripes with people who enjoy YA fantasy.
Me too.
If you heavily enjoy it, I have no problem with that. It's just the fact remains there are many things to criticize about YA fiction and the books, the authors, and the fandoms alike.
The fandoms especially, I think.
So the theme today is basically going to be, okay, I'm gonna criticize you a little bit, but please don't be mad at me.
Yeah,
I have no problem with the majority of YA readers.
With me, it's like, I think I'm starting to outgrow it. That's all it is with me. I do still enjoy it for what it is, but I have to mentally prepare myself because I have to remember I'm reading, YA, and I'm not the target audience for it anymore.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with reading YA just because I think I don't know how to explain it, but I would say that I'm a seasoned reader. And I've read a lot of fiction, and this is general, a lot of books which are very different from each other. And I have developed kind of a high standard, I think.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
kind
that's what
of,
it is, yeah.
I'm kind of an elitist, and I don't
Yeah.
really like that about myself, but I cannot deny the fact that I'm kind of an elitist when it comes to literature. So it's really, really hard for me to take up a YA book with my high expectations and be satisfied with what's written in there.
Exactly, because you've read so much, so you think, how many times can I read the same thing over and over and over again? And sometimes a book can surprise you.
Definitely.
I believe that there are YA books that might still surprise us. And if you know any, drop it down in the comments below.
Yes, we will gladly read it. We will gladly take it up and read it, and we'll give you our thoughts.
Yeah, definitely.
The reason I also have kind of a problem with the YA fantasy genre is it's oversaturated.
Yeah.
Everyone is writing YA fantasy books, and in the end, when you read them one after another, they all start to blend together and they all feel the same.
Definitely, yeah. Especially the 2012 era where everyone was writing about vampires.
Oh my god.
No, okay, listen to me. My 14-year-old self loved it. I have so many vampire books at home, but thinking about it now, it was a trend. Like, general YA fantasy is still a trend. It's slowly starting to die down, but I think as long as there's money in it, it will continue to be as big as it is. But that's not necessarily a problem if you say read this series and then nothing else, and then 5 years later you pick up another book series.
That is exactly what I wanted to say. I have it here in my notes. This whole blending together when it comes to the genre can also happen with high fantasy if we're fair.
Definitely.
The world is, it's magic, it's dragons, it's fighting, it's, swords and dying and all of that drama. And it definitely can start blending together. So what I like to do, because I absolutely love high fantasy, I like to space it out.
Yeah,
I read maybe I read the Farseer trilogy this year. I started in January, and I have high fantasy books still on my shelf that I haven't read, but I don't think I'm going to pick them up until next year.
Yeah.
I need to let this Farseer trilogy, which is a huge trilogy, it's like this whole entire enormous world. I need to let it sit and simmer and settle down within me before I can move on.
Yeah. What I'm doing at the moment is reading The Witcher still, but the way I'm going about it is I order a book, I read it, and then I order another one, and then read something while I'm waiting for the next book to arrive. And maybe my mistake was reading Love in the Time of Cholera and then Fire and Blood, and now I'm back at The Witcher, so I am mixing two fantasies again. But I mean, The Witcher is just that good.
I haven't read it yet, but it's definitely high on my priority list of reads.
It should be on everyone's priority list.
Is it that good?
It is that good.
Okay, I'm very excited now.
Even if you don't know the video games or you've never seen the TV show, the books are amazing. God. The reason I'm saying this is because I might be bringing up The Witcher throughout this episode. So I need to establish that I haven't finished the book series, I just told you why, but it's just that good.
Okay, I totally believe you. When you said that you're going to be bringing The Witcher up, I then want to establish that I will be bringing the Farseer trilogy up because it's the most recent high fantasy series I've read. And it's easiest to compare to that which you've read most recently. So that's why I'm going to be bringing it up, because it's an absolutely wonderful series. The world is so vast, it's so huge, there's so much lore to it that we haven't even explored in this original trilogy, because there's, in the end, I think there's like 12 or 15 books in the series altogether.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I've only read the 3.
Brings me back to my vampire days when I read, how many are there? I think between 13 and 16, I can't remember the exact number of the Morganville vampires.
I've never heard of that.
I was on a vampire high. I craved more. I needed vampire books, and that was my vampire book high.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember, and I completely forgot about this until this point right now.
Okay.
I read the series called House of Night.
Oh, of course I read them.
Did you?
Of course.
Fantastic.
I didn't
finish either, because there's so many books, and I think
books.
I don't know how many there are. I'm gonna just say off the top of my head, probably around 15.
Yeah.
And I think I stopped around book 9 or 10 because it was just
8. Yeah. I think the same problem that I had with Morganville vampires is it just gets to stale at some point, because how many times can you bring up a new evil that's more powerful than the previous evil?
one, right? Yeah.
So, but the thing about Morganville vampires that I remember, I hated the ending. Who got together with who, I hated it, but I was so attached to the characters. I think that's why I stuck with it as long as I did.
I have to say, I never really got into that vampire craze that deeply. When Twilight came out, of course, I was obsessed. Actually, I was obsessed a little late into the game. I think the first 2 movies were already out before I even read the first book.
The thing is, we should mention this, things come to Slovenia a little bit later than the rest of the world. And that's why the whole Twilight craze came to us like too late. It was too late.
Too late,
so,
It was like 2-3 years later than the rest of the world, so I couldn't get into it the same way that everyone else did, because it didn't happen here. Plus, I'm not that kind of person. I get obsessed with a lot of things, but I, weirdly enough, didn't get obsessed as much with Twilight than I did with other things. Although, this is, me saying I'm not that obsessed. I read the series 8 times.
Oh.
I read all the books 8 times.
I've read it once over. I started the first 3 books. I didn't finish them, but I read the last one before the movie came out. So, here's the thing. We're gonna start with Twilight. I think it's a good place to start when discussing YA fantasy, because it set the genre.
Oh yeah.
It set the whole YA craze up. That was the standard at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's also, I think, if I remember correctly, the first series that I stepped into when reading YA fantasy. I think I was like 10 or something like that. Actually, I had to be around 12. And that's like the first introduction to like vampires and fantasy for me. And I was slightly obsessed with it, not as much as some people. And what I remember most, and like what I can compare to now, is the same obsession goes with series like A Court of Thorns and Roses now, or I don't know, Six of Crows. For example, like that, there's this same craze, this same obsession, this same obsessive sort of out of control fandom, which is, I don't want to be too mean, because most of the people in the fandom are really just genuinely enjoying the books, but the bad part of the fandom, the toxic part of the fandom, is ruining the genre for everyone.
I think there's nothing wrong with enjoying a book. There's nothing wrong with establishing a fandom. I think I listened to a YouTuber, Amanda BB, watch her videos. She brought up this amazing point of teenage girls not being able to enjoy stuff without people giving them shit for it.
That's exactly what's going on. And this is a problem across the board with anything, with music, with movies, with books, with series, with literally anything. Teenage girls cannot enjoy it without people scrutinizing them over it.
And I think it partly has to do with this toxic part of the fandom that you mentioned. I think, and it is a problem, I think when I outgrew Twilight, I was one of the people who was like, ew, how can you enjoy that? But then I just, now looking back
hindsight,
at it,
right?
What was wrong with me? Just let people enjoy what they want to enjoy, and that's our disclaimer. We don't want to bash anyone who enjoys this type of literature, because as long as you're reading and as long as you're not problematic and as long as that's basically that, then it's fine.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say in my disclaimer at the beginning. I have absolutely no gripes with people who enjoy YA fantasy. Most of the people that read YA fantasy are in the age range where it's meant for them. So like, why shouldn't they enjoy it?
Exactly.
The problem that I have is, and this was like recently, I mean, it was brought to my attention a long time ago, but recently I saw a surge of it on the internet when the series for A Court of Thorns and Roses was announced, where people were absolutely bullying the writer, or like the people that worked with the writer on the series, because they were afraid of what the casting was going to be like. And I understand that you have this huge love for this book. You want everything to be perfect, and a lot of people didn't even want a series because they wanted it to stay perfect. But you cannot go around bullying people over it.
I think this whole trend started in these times whose name we cannot say because YouTube doesn't like it when we say it. These times just gave people nothing to do but bully, because they have time. And I think that's why cancel culture grew as much as it grew because of this. But I think your time would be much better spent reading that book series instead of trying to bully people for trying to bring it to life to people who don't like to read as much or don't read for certain reasons and just want to enjoy watching it.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. And if you do have criticism for it, maybe you should take all the time that you have, and instead of bullying, come up with actually constructive criticism that you can send to these people in a nice, kind, and accepting way. You know, you don't have to be mean over the internet, being anonymous on your computers just because you don't like something. Okay, I just want to mention it started raining pretty heavily and it's raining on the window. So if you hear a little bit of pitter patter, that's the rain and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, sadly.
Okay. But if we return, what we wanted to say mostly was Twilight was a big series and it set the precedent for what YA fiction should be.
Exactly.
And right now we're seeing a resurgence of that because it was kind of stagnant in the middle, I feel like.
Yeah, I wanted to mention I picked up The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh because I needed my vampire fix again, and just because it was so stagnant, I really did enjoy going back to it because I wasn't as much a Twilight fan as I was a Vampire Academy fan. That was a to-go YA book series for me with the accompanying series Bloodlines. It was, in my mind, that was the perfect vampire story. And I just want to say, I probably will do a readathon this summer of Vampire Academy, but I am a little bit scared because
you outgrew the sort of fiction, right?
I'm scared I'm gonna hate it. I'm so scared because right now I hold it to like the vampire YA standard that is Vampire Academy, but I'm so scared.
You know, I know that if I go back to reading the YA fantasy that I loved years ago, I am going to hate it.
Yeah.
I tried picking up, I know Cassandra Clare is huge right now, and she's been huge for a while. And I read Mortal Instruments when I was just starting high school. So I was still in the age range where it was appropriate, I guess, for me to read it. And I took up her Clockwork Angel book.
You didn't like it?
And I hated it. I hated it.
That's what hurt me the most because I still am a Cassandra Clare fan. I read Dark Artifices last year. We're in our third one right now, so I did have to remember I'm reading YA. Yeah, that was the thing because I did the jump back. I still loved it, and in all fairness, Mortal Instruments the worst out of all of them.
Well, see, I have this like good memory of Mortal Instruments because I read it when I was supposed to read it. But now that I took up what is this series with the Clockwork Angel?
Infernal Devices.
Infernal Devices. Okay, so I took up this book and I realized that it is just not for me. I thought the interactions were really awkward. I thought the plot points made absolutely no sense. I thought the world building was like really rushed, kind of weird, mostly unnecessary, and like real world interactions just don't go that way.
See, the thing is, I'm sorry for interrupting you, that was my favorite one. Still, out of all of them, I haven't read the Chain of Gold ones, but the three main ones that are already out, all of them, Infernal Devices was the first Shadowhunters series I read, and it's still my favorite.
And I have absolutely no problem with that, believe me. It's just when I read it, I was already 20 years old, and I hadn't read YA fiction in like 6 years.
And it shows.
It does show. And the problem I have with this series, with Cassandra Clare mostly, and I want to like highlight that right now, I noticed that her writing was exactly the same as in Mortal Instruments, where like she didn't kind of grow up at all.
I think because I think, if I'm not mistaken, first it was Mortal Instruments, but I'm not sure if Infernal Devices came in between at the same time, or if they came entirely after. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they came out around the same time. And that's why it might be the way that it is.
Okay, that would make sense. But this is like a problem that I have with YA fiction.
Of course,
in general, because it feels like these books are written for 14 to, I don't know, like let's say 12 to 15-year-olds, and they're all written the same way for 12 to 15-year-olds, even though when someone starts reading it and they're 12, and by the time they finish the series they're like 17, you know, it's not for them anymore. It doesn't grow up with them. And a great example for books that do grow up with you as you read them is Harry Potter.
I think I mentioned that one in my top 10 because it's in my number 2 spot. They did grow up with us.
Definitely.
And that's why they stayed so relevant, I think. And that's why they are still relevant.
Yes, because anyone who is 6 years old can pick up the first book and grow up with it until they're 15. And like the same way anyone who's 15 can pick it up and grow up with it until they're 25. It's, you know, it grows up with you in any stage of life that you pick it up.
Exactly.
Right? And that's just something that's missing from YA fiction right now. I feel like, you know, you have this one formula and it works fantastic.
And it sells.
Yeah, and you stay in that formula without like evolving as an author, without evolving your characters, and without letting your audience evolve.
Exactly. Yeah, that's basically what it is. You're not letting us as your audience evolve. And I think there's really this gap that needs to be filled between YA and adult. I think it's called NA, so new adult, but I haven't read as many books as, I don't remember if I even read one where people are 20 to 25 becoming, you know, gradually transitioning from teenagers to adults. And I think there's a gap there, a definite gap.
And it's like, okay, this is what I wanted to add in YA fiction, because it's only written for a certain group of age group of people. You have fans that suddenly just drop off at some point because they've outgrown the fiction. And it's true that you do gain new fans as you go, but instead of building an audience where you get to keep your first fans, you just drop them off, not care about them, go do whatever you want, and you only care about the new ones. And like, instead of building an audience bigger and bigger, you just keep it the same size, but lose fans and gain fans on the daily, you know?
I think I want to mention the example that we both read and discussed of good YA fantasy, the Six of Crows duology. I think in those books, when you read them, you're not limited to the characters' actual ages, because they act so much more maturely for their ages. So you can read it and pretend, okay, they're 20 and they'll be doing the exact same thing.
I remember reading it and thinking, before their ages were mentioned, I was like, okay, yeah, these people are like 20 to 25, right?
Yeah.
They're in that middle age group where they're still young and they're still, active and smart and innovative, but they're not childish.
Yeah. And I really wish that they weren't 16, 17, 18. I really wished that they were actually older. Well, while I'm reading it, I can pretend that they're older, but it would have worked if they were, because you've already had that established demographic from Shadow and Bone, and they could have easily been older, and it would have worked.
Yeah, definitely, because just the way they act, plus why should characters in YA fiction be limited to being teenagers?
Exactly.
A teenager can read about a character in a book and just as much like them and just as much relate to them if they're older, as long as they're written well.
The problem that comes with that is that they don't act 16, 17. I mean, I get it. When you're reading, let's say, George Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire, and you're like, okay, these kids are 13, 14, getting married, okay. You're like, it's not okay, it's not appropriate, but at the same time, it's a fantasy world where they are forced to grow up quicker. But on the other hand, why? They're 16 and they're not acting like a normal 16-year-old would act. At least let them, if you want to include 16-year-olds into YA, let them act their age.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if you don't want them to act their age, and if you do want them to grow up fast, they can still be like 22. That's considered really young, but like they can still act like real adults. And I have no gripes with that, because people, when they are forced to grow up fast, they usually act like that when they like reach the age of about 20.
Yeah.
It's unnatural for a 16-year-old to act that way, because it doesn't happen. Even if you were forced to grow up fast,
your mind is still 16.
You're still 16, no matter what. Your brain is still developing.
Your body is still developing.
Yeah, you have like hormones all up in you. So like, why would you pretend that you're something you're not? And why do these books, like, they set this whole like, I think they set teenagers up to fail, because they create this image of what teenagers are supposed to act like. Just make them 23.
Yeah. Simple as that. Make them older if you want your characters to act a certain way. It's simple as that. But as it goes, Six of Crows duology is, in my opinion, it has its flaws, and
definitely
they would require a longer discussion, but as it stands, it is a standard for YA.
For
it
right
is
now.
Still good YA.
But in it, when we mention flaws, we actually have a few notes written down about what things bother us in YA fiction. And a lot of these examples are actually in Six of Crows as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So one that we can point out, I personally think, is the lack of character development.
Yes.
These characters have these their tropes. They have their one characteristic set. Like, I don't know, Nina is, always hungry and very feminine, and Matthias tries to hold on to his honor, and I don't know, these tropes, they stay with them, and they don't really develop. They might, like, a person is at a certain level and they develop, levels upwards, and a certain character should develop, like, for example, in the Farseer trilogy, the main character Fitz really develops from this child to a real grown-up that's forced to make huge decisions. And he, at the end of the trilogy, would never have made the same decisions as he did at the beginning of the trilogy. And he understands things differently. So he went up like 20 levels. Whereas in Six of Crows, you have these characters that have like these characteristics almost built into them that they try to hold on to with all fours. And
they don't do a breakfast club.
No.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
they
don't
do that. At the end, they should have, do a breakfast club. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Breakfast Club is a movie with 5 teenagers who are all these high school tropes. And by the end of the movie, they realize that they are more than their tropes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good precedent for what these books should have done.
Yeah, this is what these books should have. Like, the Breakfast Club could sort of be a guide for them.
Yes.
The movie is really short, right?
Yeah.
All things considered, but the characters
a bit of problematic bits. I just want to say
definitely.
we are aware of those stuff.
Definitely, but for how short the movie is, the characters do make a lot of progress in it. So what these authors should do is thoroughly study the Breakfast Club so that they can stretch that amount of progress out into their series, where at the end you should recognize the same character but realize the changes that they've made.
Exactly.
And it's really hard to do with YA fiction because, it seems like the authors are sort of limiting themselves. They set up, okay, this person is going to be this, and this, and then they, like, are afraid to stray away from what they wanted the character to be. Even if in the middle you decide, okay, maybe this character doesn't want to do that anymore, you can write that in. That's not a problem.
And it's gonna be so much better.
Yeah. And you can include in, personal thoughts or like development of the character, and it'll bring so much more depth and so much more substance to the character than like Nina, for example, who is, I have big boobs and I like to eat cookies. And that's like her entire personality.
Yeah. Okay, so most of my criticism is about the way women are portrayed, but since we're speaking about Nina, I want to add that I really, really hate this trope of a woman not being able to be strong and feminine at the same time. So she can either be tomboyish but be strong, or feminine but be a bit ditzy and not being able to do anything. And I think Nina is the exact opposite of that. Yeah. I think that's my plus side when it comes to Nina's character, because she is this very gorgeous, beautiful, feminine woman, but she will kick your ass.
Oh yeah, she definitely will. And that's a good like character point for her. So that's a plus point for the series, right? But it does in the end sort of limit her as well, because it focuses only on the fact that she's feminine and strong.
Exactly. Because that's her personality rather than, having an actual personality.
Yeah.
The problem with this duology is that their character tropes are their personalities.
Yeah, exactly. They only like have one aspect to their personality, or maybe like 2 or 3, because they all do have troubled pasts that do explain why they are the way they are. But like these troubled pasts should actually make them more like diverse, more I don't know how to say it, like, I mean, just have more aspects to themselves, right?
And just because they're such a mixed crowd, they could have learned from each other.
Yeah, but they like keep to themselves.
The breakfast club.
They could have been,
They could have done that, and they didn't. It was such a perfect opportunity.
And I think that I don't remember a lot from the book, like the specifics, because I did read it a while ago.
Yes.
But I don't think they talk a lot. And one thing that really, really bothers me, and this goes across the board when it comes to literature, people don't talk to each other, and they don't share their feelings and their problems and their issues, and they don't try to explain why they are the way they are. They all just hide within themselves, and they're really annoying, because I'm that type of person that just wants everything out in the open. If I have an issue, I'm going to tell you, and if you have an issue with me, I expect you to tell me.
Exactly, yeah. So another problem, since we were speaking about Twilight some time ago, I hate the passive rescue me type protagonist, female protagonist. Don't get me wrong, because there's only the female passive rescue type. Yeah. I
mean, I would love to see a poor little, woe is me, rescue me now boy in fiction.
That would have been cute and awesome.
Yeah. That would have been something different, but like the fact that these writers only put in women as these sort of, I'm a damsel in distress, someone has to, carry me across this puddle.
And then once they do something that's, I don't know, defend themselves or something, or stab someone, it's considered like they've defeated Voldemort. Come on!
Yeah, it's like suddenly, oh my god, you've done this huge thing. No, let the character develop. You can have this sort of damsel in distress at the beginning,
and develop in someone. I mean, in Bella's case, she became strong only once she turned A into a vampire and B into a mother.
Yeah.
And that was the only time she became strong and didn't need rescue. And it's stupid.
And that's only because at that point it was absolutely necessary for the plot that she wasn't a damsel in distress anymore.
Exactly.
And
because they had a literal damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And it was the little kid whose name I refuse to say.
Oh my god, yes.
It's so bad.
It's
so
disgusting.
Bad. Yeah.
No, but like, I understand that Bella had this damsel in distress trope at the beginning. She was thrown into this new world.
It makes sense.
Yeah, she was thrown into this new world. She was, pushed into a world that she never expected to be in. She had no idea how it worked. And she, was new to everything. So yes, I understand that. But by the, by the second book, when she had to, face down the Volturi,
exactly.
She should have had some sort of click in her. She should have prepared herself better. She should have tried at least to become stronger as a person, as a character.
Exactly.
And by the third book, when the threat of Victoria was looming and she was surrounded by vampires and werewolves, and she knew exactly what the world she was in was like, she should have already been more prepared to fight. And instead they took her to a tent in the woods and they waited it out.
And it was, the whole plot served just that love triangle, which was so unnecessary.
So unnecessary.
I mean, it started this whole thing, vampires, werewolves, sort of stuff. But I always say, Twilight would have been an amazing book series if it weren't for Bella, Edward, and Jacob. If they were just taken out, it would have been fine. Otherwise, write a romance novel. Keep the supernatural aspect out.
Yeah, because, like, and this happens in a lot of fantasy books. The main characters are a lot of the times more boring and more annoying than any of the side characters.
Exactly.
And you want to read about the side characters way more. You know who I wanted to read about in Twilight? Fucking Alice and Jasper.
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 Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to read about them. They were the most interesting.
I wanted the entire history of the Volturi.
Yeah.
It was so good. So good. The way that they were established. It was so good. And I want that. I don't care about Midnight Sun. I don't want the entire first book from Edward's perspective. I don't care.
That's what it is?
I think. I think so. Yeah, I mean, give me the Volturi and I will buy it. I will buy it in hardcover.
Yeah, definitely. Another point that I wanted to bring up that's, happening with a lot of these books is poor quality writing.
Exactly.
I cannot get over that because that's the biggest issue I had, as I said, with the Cassandra Clare books, because I think the conversations are unnatural. There's bad flow, like it just does not flow well. The mannerisms of people aren't written well enough for me to actually imagine the way that they move throughout the world, that they perceive the world. As I said, poor character building and development. And like, of course, with all of this comes plot holes.
Yeah.
So many plot holes.
Yeah. I just want to say, even though I love those books, I can still see their flaws.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there.
And with that comes my recommendation for a YA series that when I read it, did not even realize was a YA series. It is the best series of fantasy that I've read in a while, and I think it's definitely still one of my favorites when it comes to to fantasy, and it is the Shattered Sea Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. It has 3 books in it. Obviously it's a trilogy. And the first one is called Half a King. The first one is the best out of the trilogy, and it is wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. It features not only LGBT characters, it features really strong female characters. It features the main character of the first book is a crippled boy. How many times have you read about a crippled boy? And it has a lot of character development. There's action. It's really fast paced. It's really diverse in its characters. It's just wonderful all around, and it's really well written, and it just warms my heart. And I am obsessed with that series, and I've forced everyone in my life to read it because it's just that good.
She did recommend it to me. I haven't read it
so many times. I always mention it. If you read anything fantasy, please read the Shattered Sea Trilogy. It is so good. I cannot sing about it enough. The second book, I had to say, is the worst.
Okay.
It's about one of the best characters.
Okay.
This fighter type girl that wants to avenge her father's death, so
nice.
She
I hope she doesn't do a Hamlet.
My god, I mean, it's kind of tragic, but not in the same way. The whole and what's good about the series is the first book is about Yarvi, this crippled boy, and then in the second book it focuses on a different character altogether, but Yarvi is still kind of present, and then in the third book it's again another set of characters, but Yarvi is still there, and the girl Thorn is still there.
Nice.
But sort of in shadows in the background. You can still see where they are in life. You can see their development as characters, but you get to focus on new characters without anything being taken away from the previous books. It is so good. I cannot praise it enough. It is so good.
Oh, I don't think I've got a YA series that I would recommend that much. Only because
sad.
I haven't read Vampire Academy now with my perspective now. I might recommend that one, but I haven't read it in a really, really long time. But I would say I started with The Witcher. I'll again mention The Witcher because it's a good bridge from YA to full-on adult fantasy, high fantasy. Because the world is so diverse and complicated and complex and everything that it does belong in that high fantasy category. But at the same time, the plot and the characters are a bit easier to follow compared to like Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah.
So I would recommend that one to both YA lovers and high fantasy lovers. It's really good. It's really good.
I think YA fiction is kind of ruined for me ever since I started reading more high fantasy, and then I made the mistake, the quote-unquote mistake of reading the gold standard, which is The Lord of the Rings, right?
Okay. I'm gonna say I liked the books. I didn't love them. I read them. I enjoyed them.
No.
But again, the same thing that was with Dune was the pacing.
Yeah, the pacing can be really slow at times, especially
That's what bothers me the most.
one thing that stood out to me and stands out to me still. My boyfriend is currently reading The Lord of the Rings, and I kept mentioning to him, beware of the council chapter, when they take counsel before they go on the path, to Mordor.
You can't see my face.
Yeah,
but
that
I did a face.
Like that 40 or I don't know. I think it's 20-page, a 20-page chapter, but it feels like an eternity. It feels like you're reading like 100 pages.
Can we just talk about the first book, the first half of the first book, when they just take forever just to leave the Shire and get to Bree and get anywhere.
But I thought that journey was really fun. Like the thing that fucking crawled through the forest, that was terrifying.
That was good, but it could have been 2 chapters.
But
shorter.
I loved it so much. And the tree that tried to eat them, and like the whole Tom Bombadil thing. I don't know why people hate Tom Bombadil.
I don't, to be honest.
I loved him.
That was the highlight of those chapters.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was wonderful, and I loved how long they took to get out of the Shire.
In a way, it makes sense, but writing-wise, he could have done a better job. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, but like, would you have done a better job being thrown into a situation like that?
Okay, fair point. Fair point. It is more realistic, and overall, those books are good. I'm not gonna say that they're not, because they are.
They're really good.
They are really good.
I just want to point the irony of you saying that a fantasy book is realistic.
Oh my god, I'm stupid sometimes.
But truly, no, it truly is, as far as it goes with, the trials and tribulations that you go through in a world like that. Because, again, that's what we mentioned before. The world is established and the plot is happening within the world. It makes sense, and it is logical, and it is realistic that, he goes through that.
Fantasy, you still have creatures that aren't super speed fast.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. It is realistic.
It is realistic.
It being fantasy, that they would take that much time. But I think it could have been done a little bit differently.
It could have been written differently, but I also think it makes sense, the fact that Tolkien wrote these books soon after coming back from World War One. I mean, of course he wrote them like that. Of course it took that much time. Of course he went through so many horrible things. He was probably, getting out his horrible memories and his trauma and his thoughts on the war, which was in his thoughts senseless, as every war is. And he got his trauma out in that way, and I think it makes so much sense that the way the world was built, Frodo was plagued by it the way he was. So yeah, I really think that Lord of the Rings is the gold standard, and
It is.
I love it so much.
Despite me not loving it,
Yeah.
it is. I still know that it's a classic. It's slowly becoming an actual classic. So,
but plus, okay, so we have Lord of the Rings as the gold standard, and the only series that I can think of that come really close to that standard, although I haven't read it, is A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, it does.
When it comes to the world building, the diversity, the languages that are involved, all the work that goes and the thought that goes into creating the world, it is probably the only series that can even come close to Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
I read can I just mention? I read the Silmarillion, which is sort of the history of Middle Earth, and it's how it became and everything like that. And the lore that's in there is just insane. And I think when I think of Silmarillion and the lore and the world building that went into that, I can also think of A Song of Ice and Fire, because I bet that just as much work and just as much effort went into building that world.
Definitely. And I think when I finished reading Fire and Blood, that's when I realized how big the world was and how much history and lore is in that book series. And I still need to read what's it called, The History of Westeros, something like that. It's an entire book dedicated to like the Silmarillion. Tongue twister. But yeah, it's sort of like that. So I just read, this is the history of House Targaryen, but that one is, I think, the entire history of the world. It's insane.
I think that, honestly, I said that I'll probably never pick up A Song of Ice and Fire, right? But I think I might dive into these histories.
Yeah, they are really good. They are.
They
might end up convincing you to read.
Maybe.
Story.
I mean, I'm not saying no. I am never saying no, to the entire series. But right now, where I am in life and where I feel like my reading journey is taking me is not in the direction of.
And that's completely fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I just mention the two things that I still hate about YA? About women.
Okay,
in
yeah.
YA.
Definitely.
I've got two more points that I want to cover, and one of them is I'm not pretty at all, but I'm actually super chiseled and unflawed and perfect. I'm looking at you, Alina Starko. I am. I'm gonna say it. The problem with that comes, so you have this character that says, I'm not pretty, I'm not beautiful like other girls. But then she says, look at me, I'm super skinny, my ribs are showing, blah, 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 blah. You know what you do when you say that? First of all, you say that girls who are super skinny aren't pretty, and you make the girls who aren't super skinny super insecure because they aren't. Just stop. Just stop.
Yeah.
I know. Teenage girls. We were teenage girls once.
At some point, yes.
Yeah. We all hate our bodies at some point. And just throwing that in a novel we will pick up, it's just not good. It's so damaging.
I think it's... I don't know why novels even have to like mention how people are feeling about their body types.
Okay.
I think you can just mention what their body type is for sake of diversity, for sake of like good writing and like, you know, creating a real image of the character in people's minds. But like other than that, if you're not going to mention yourself in a positive way, your physical like self, then don't mention it at all. I can understand, you know, when like, I don't know, a character gets a scar across their face and they're really insecure about it, but they, you know, come to terms with the way they look now and then they're fine with it. That's a positive thing. But if you start out with a person who's like, oh, I hate how skinny I am, or something like that, or, you know, whichever way it goes, you make it okay for the readers to also think the same things. And if you don't, by the end of the book, fix the image that the character has of themselves, then you've done nothing.
Exactly. And just, Alina Starko is why I hate Shadow and Bone. Just take her out. She's so annoying, and it's first person.
Oh, she's the main character?
Yes. It's... Six of Crows was so good. That we've got this. I read Shadow and Bone before I read Six of Crows.
I think
I was so disappointed because we don't need another Bella Swan. I mean, it's like Alina gets this power and she's suddenly goddess, but she doesn't do anything. Her decisions have no impact, but she's suddenly worshipped by everyone and she doesn't grow as a character at all. It's like she was stuck in this position and in the position of a protagonist, and she didn't really want to be there, and she was, and it's not even explored how she doesn't want to be that, you know? I mean, I can get it. Okay, you're suddenly thrust in the position where you need to save the world and you don't want to do it, but then explore that properly. And she just exists, and that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying, and I think I saw, like, I haven't watched the series or read the book, but I saw memes on Bookstagram which, you know, mentioned Alina, is it Alina?
Yeah, Alina.
Alina as someone who's really annoying. So I think you're not alone in this this opinion.
I am. Because again, the same with Twilight. Just think Alina and whatever his name is, her love interest, just take them out and it'll be good. It was so good. It had one of the most interesting villains in YA that I've read. He was perfect, scary, powerful, dangerously alluring, and he was everything but got ruined by such a lame protagonist.
Oh, that's so bad when that happens. That's so sad.
Yeah.
It's really annoying. That's why... that's another reason why I really don't want to pick up any YA books right now. Because I just feel like if I read it, I'm just gonna hate it. So why even bother? I'm going to stay away from it. Let other people enjoy it as much as they want. It's just, I'm just gonna stay away from it. I am not interested.
Yeah. I have another point that sort of relates to everything that I've been bringing up about women in YA, and that's the toxicity of pushing "I'm not like other girls" trope. I think it's so problematic because it implies this notion that girls are supposed to be something, and then it says that is bad, and the only thing you can be is this exact opposite. So there's just only black and white and no gray areas. For example, I am the kind of person that loves to do my makeup. I love to do my makeup, but at the same time I also like to play video games, and certain books would have me believe that I can do either or
and not both, right?
Yeah, and that's the problem.
I have to mention this because I did sing a lot about Shattered Sea earlier. Yeah. There is this character, Thorn, that's maybe exactly like that. She, she's this warrior type, really strong, really everything, and she's not feminine. And people try to make her more feminine, but she doesn't feel comfortable with that, and that's fine. But she is one of those like character tropes. But what I wanted to mention is that there's also other females in the book who are feminine and strong at the same time. So it's, she is this trope, but she's not the only one in the book. Yeah. And her teacher...
That's the thing. Yeah, you can be someone who is strong and doesn't enjoy pretty dresses and makeup, but don't make that the standard. That's the problem.
For example, her teacher, she has a teacher that like makes her stronger and all of that. Her teacher is a woman. She is, sort of feminine. She's really old, which is very rare, again, in characters. They tend to keep away from older people because they can't be strong or anything. So she's an old woman, always in like dresses, always with a lot of necklaces, but she's also a fighter, right? And she teaches Thorn, who is a tomboy, who doesn't like, pretty dresses and nice things, but who permits herself to fall in love. So that's a thing, like all of these tomboys are a lot of the time, ooh, love, that's not for me, right? No, Thorn isn't like that. And then again, like I said, there's other characters, female characters in the books who are both feminine and strong, or like they don't really have a description of their look, but they are strong, or things like that. So, like I said, you can include the trope, but do not make it a standard, like you said earlier.
And I just want to say, for my gentlemen out there, I hate how you're presented as well. Like, always these guys who are super strong, and the only time that they can be weak is when they need the main protagonist, female protagonist, to fix them.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate it. I'm sorry, guys. You do deserve better in YA as well. You deserve to be full-fledged characters and not just this hunky, perfect body, sharp-chinned, sharp cheekbone kind of guy with perfect abs at 16 when it's technically not even possible. You do deserve better.
And you deserve to, be represented as people who feel, as people who have thoughts and opinions that aren't necessarily like manly or whatever. And you're allowed to be weak, and you're allowed to
That's one thing that The Lord of the Rings does well. It does portray man in a really normal way.
Yeah.
And they're not even all technically men, because they're hobbits and elves. And
I love the way that elves are described with really like being in touch with their feelings, with their emotions, with each other. They're like really connected to like the earth, to nature, to each other, to their feelings, and that's like that's the like really the gold standard for what all humans should act like,
Yes. And
I wish we could all be elves.
Don't think that because I mentioned stuff about women primarily that men in YA aren't flawed, but the problem is because the protagonists are most often women, and this kind of, well, YA is primarily targeted at teenage girls. That's why these problems stand out even more.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that men in YA aren't misrepresented.
And that creates, again, like this false image for people who do read YA about what men should do, be, and act like.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's a lot of the times it's saving the girl or like whatever, or being fixed by the girl. Like Kaz
I hate that one.
Like Kaz is. Kaz. You know, like...
Yeah, Kaz.
Kaz, right?
Kaz,
he needs to be fixed by everyone. He's such a poor, tortured soul. And yes, he is. But, like, he won't let anyone in except for Inej?
We don't know how to pronounce that one.
Inej or Inej, I'm not sure.
Something like that.
He needs to be fixed by her, but why? Why does the responsibility of fixing you fall on someone else? Go see a therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
Go see a goddamn
if
therapist.
People from Six of Crows would have just gone and seen
therapy,
a good therapist.
Yeah.
It would have been so much better because
group therapy.
The amount of self-pity is what took not just, 5 stars. Crooked Kingdom, the sequel, I rated it 3 stars.
I think I did too, because first of all, the whole thing was messy.
Yeah, but just the amount of self-pity.
Yeah.
I can't. But it's still, the fact that I said this is the standard for YA, it speaks volumes.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So, my lovely gentlemen, please don't take advice from YA.
Don't. No, and girls who like guys also don't curate your standards to be that of YA fiction, because no one is going to reach those standards.
Exactly. Because men,
you and not your guys.
Exactly. Exactly. So would you like to add anything in conclusion?
Yeah, I wrote down a few recommendations that I have for fantasy lovers out there. So I already mentioned the Shattered Sea trilogy. I do want to recommend the Farseer trilogy just because of what I think is good writing and what I think is good character development. It has really good world building, like I said, good feminist themes. It has 2 very strong female characters. It doesn't have as many, but the 2 that are most prominent are absolutely wonderful. It has good moral dilemmas for both the characters in the book and you as a reader yourself, because you're in the same dilemma as the character. You don't know what to do, you don't know what's right, you don't know how your decision or your thinking could affect other things, right? And it has just well-rounded characters, good characters in it. And especially the last book has more female characters in it. And they're really good. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, which is already in my top 10, so I spoke about it last episode, is Priory of the Orange Tree. Although it has problems, like we mentioned in the last episode,
which book doesn't?
Yeah. Some plot holes, some it was too rushed at moments and all of that. It does have very good character representation. It's diverse, it's LGBT inclusive, it has a lot of good feminism in it, the story progression is good, and the world building is pretty good, and the writing is just wonderful. So these are I just kind of wanted to condense the recommendations for, fantasy lovers out there that might want to, step out of the YA realm.
Yeah. But if you do want to stay in the YA realm, I would say The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh is good. I had some problems with the second book, which you can read about in my review in my Instagram. But otherwise, it's still good YA. I would also say, even though we bashed it, Six of Crows, definitely go and check it out and then form your own opinion, because overall, it's not that problematic.
No, and overall, I really enjoyed it when I read it. I cannot deny that, and I am not going to. It was really fun, and I had so much fun reading it. I think I finished it in like 2 or 3 days, because, it does pull you in, and the story is good. It's really gripping, so definitely.
Yeah, and I would also say, Cassandra, Clare, Shadowhunters. I mean, they're not perfect. Mortal Instruments, definitely the worst. But as far as representation goes, Dark Artifices, they've got a trans character, which is a big no-no in the Shadowhunter world, and they've got polyamory. I'm not sure if it's accurately represented because I'm not educated enough on the topic to firmly say that. So I think overall, Shadowhunters aren't exactly bad, just some of them are. But I would also say, if you are a person who loves YA but want to branch out a bit, The Witcher. Try that. Try that. It's a good bridge to more higher fantasy. So definitely my top recommendation that you can take out of this video, The Witcher. Okay. Is this all? Do we have anything in our notes still? I don't think so. I think that's it. Okay, so then that's all. That'll be it for today. The library is closing up for the month. We hope you enjoyed, and all links to our social media will be in the description below, as well as on the screen. Some of the books that we've mentioned, I think we've both reviewed. At least not one of us reviewed them. So and we'll link our favorite series below as well, our recommendations, so it's easier for you to find. So we've been The Nerd and The Tourist, and you can find us on Instagram. Like this video, subscribe. Like this video and subscribe if you haven't yet. PewDiePie said, don't smash the like button. Destroy it! Destroy it! Okay, comment your thoughts below if you have any. I bet you do. And if you have any YA that doesn't fall in one of these categories that we've discussed, and you can say, okay, they would probably like this one because it's not what they've been talking about, then drop it down below. Yeah, please recommend it. Please do. Okay, so this is it. We'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.